We told you that we were all in this month. Taking our cue from DC Comics, we told you we were all in. And I can't think of a better way to showcase that the Comics Pals are going as in as we can than by bringing one of the greatest writers of the modern era, one of DC's top writers, one of Dark Horse's top writers, one of my favorite writers, the writer of Helen of Wyndhorn, Wonder Woman, Sheriff of Babylon, Vision, Omega Men, Batman, Strange Adventures. Let's see. Can I continue?
Could you?
Oh,
Could you?
Animal Farm, which is awesome. You guys know him. You love him. We're here with Tom King. Thank you for being here, Tom.
What an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a great joy. I was just telling you offline, I've worked a long, hard day here in LA doing this TV stuff. And so it's just to talk comics at the end of the day. I've been looking forward to it. So thank you guys for having me.
You are welcome. And I know that it's a busy time for you. I mean, it's not even just the DC stuff, but you're working Dark Horse. You've got Helen of Wyndhorn, which is nearing its
Yeah,
end. And I want to say before we get into the meat of this conversation, huge shout out to Dark Horse for making this possible.
for
Thank you. The
sure.
people over there have been fantastic. And Helen of Wyndhorn #6 drops November 13th. So we do have those. We do have that coming up. Now you're going to be at New York Comic Con, right?
I am. I'm on a crazy schedule. I fly every single week in October. So I was in LA for a week, then I was back in DC for a week, and then I just flew into LA 2 days ago, and then a day from now I fly into New York overnight, and then I fly back to LA after that, and then I fly back to DC. I don't fucking know what time zone I'm on. But yeah, I will be in New York Friday morning. I will be exhausted because I don't sleep on planes, and so if you see me, it's a good time to like make terrible suggestions because I will say yeah because I'll just be in a total fog. But yeah, I'll be there. I love New York. This is my what like it's got to be a decade of New York Comic Con. It's a great con.
Sure, yeah. Uh, have you noticed any kind of change, I guess, in terms of the vibe of New York Comic Con from when you started going a decade ago to now?
I think I was there at the second New York Comic Con. New York Comic Con, people know, is not that old. There was like a different Comic Con, but the actual like the modern New York Javits Center is pretty young. It's
Yeah.
only been around for like 12, 13 years. So I think I was at the second one. Um, and then they moved, and the Artist Alley was like in the main room, and then they moved Artist Alley out to like this kind of cool place where we had sunshine, we almost had our own building for Artist Alley back in the day when I was promoting like Grayson, and Sheriff of Babylon that you mentioned before. And then the real vibe change came when they moved us from that place into the basement. So now
Yeah.
you go to Artist Alley, you don't see the sun all day long. You sit there and you're like, if there's a nuclear attack, would I know? Am I just going to come out and it's going to be the end of days? I have no idea. I have just because you're stuck in this basement and there's a billion people. Um, yeah, I would say that's the big change in your comic. I mean, your Comic Con has become bigger. It used to be
Yeah.
everything was so centered on San Diego, and now I feel like New York Comic Con's become almost like its own planet. It has its own gravitational system in terms of like huge announcements and huge opportunities. And for what I love to do at cons, there's just a lot of shit that's cool to buy. Like all the awesome vendors are at New York. There's no better show to, in my opinion. San Diego's really good to walk the floor, but there's no better show that has just better loot than New York Comic Con. You find just the best like guys selling old toys you want, old comics you want, old art you want. That's what I love most about New York. Buying shit.
That's incredible. I cannot wait to get on that show floor and buy some stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
Speaking of buying stuff, speaking of buying stuff, part of what we want everybody to do is to check out Helen of Wyndhorn because
Please.
it's yeah, it's not just Tom King. You know you love Tom King, but it's also
No.
Bilquis Evely, who is doing
Yes.
Ooh.
all-star level work. Obviously, we know she killed it on Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Tremendous job. But there are a lot of people who may have seen that and they go, wow, that was fantastic. Where else can I find these two working together? And Helen of Wyndhorn is that book. How did the collaborative process start up with you guys? Did you just know you wanted to do more after Supergirl?
I mean, I sent her an email. I've sent other artists before her and since the sort of. I mean, her work on Supergirl was so pristine and so beautiful, and I was blown away by what she did on that. I mean, she was turning my scripts into poetry. I couldn't believe how much effort and how much detail and how much beauty she was putting on each page. And I was like, this is a superstar. I've worked with some people, and she's been Eisner nominated. She's worked with Neil Gaiman. She's not like coming out of nowhere. She's not, but I was like, she's gonna shoot like a rocket.
Right.
Um, and I sent her, and she's very nice too. So I sent her emails. I said, whatever you want to do. You want to create her own? Do you want to do Batman? You want to do, I don't know, like whatever, Kite Man show? Whatever you want to draw, I will do a script for you. I don't care what it is. I want to put words in the mouths of your people. And she came back and she's like, I want to do creator owned. And she sent me sort of a mood board of what she wanted to work on. And from that, I sort of came up with the Helen idea, and I sort of sent her the general pitch like the next day.
It kind of goes to a place from an artistic style with her that I didn't expect, and it was stuff that I haven't seen her draw yet. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, at the end of the five, and don't tell so many of my best. I work with the best artists in comics I have for a decade, and like my favorite partners, Mitch, Garris, we're both best friends, and we worked together for so long. So definitely don't tell him, and don't tell Greg Smallwood, and don't tell Doc Shane, or don't tell Clayman. But after the end of five, which is a random issue, it's number five in a 6 issue miniseries. I sent a note and I was like, "This may be the best drawn comic I've ever worked on." I was like, "I cannot believe what this looks like." And both it to her and Matt Lopez, who's on colors, and
Yeah.
just makes everything shine. Yeah, it was. I've never written a note like that before, but I was like, I'm just a random note that I just this might be the pinnacle. I'm not sure, but it might be. I couldn't believe how good it looked.
What did it look like from that mood board to where it is now? Like how have you seen that art transform from those initial ideas to the best art and best comics you've written?
I mean, the mood board generally wasn't her stuff. She was sending me like old pulp sort of images, from the 20s, no, not 20s, like 30s and 40s, some more sci-fi and some more so. And then she was sending me like kind of old movie stuff that she was kind of into, femme fatales and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and then but also like stuff with a little bit of a fantasy edge. But it was all based in kind of this, that the period the book takes place in, like sort of the 30s. So it very much sort of evolved after that. But her first designs were, I mean, she nailed it right off the bat. I didn't give her, not that I have ever noted an artist, but I haven't given her one single note. I mean, she has had carte blanche to design every single thing. If I don't know if I'm famous or infamous for it, but my scripts are fairly bare. I'll be like, splash, Wyndhorn house. It's an elaborate big mansion, and that's it. And she'll be like, here's 1,000 details of like how each rooftop circles into itself and all this stuff. Like, she whatever she's drawn from is absolutely amazing. Yeah.
So that's really interesting about your scripts being sort of bare. Obviously, it runs the gamut in terms of people's style and the way they approach scripting. Do you stick to that bareness, or do you sort of change a bit based on the artist that you're working with? And if you don't, then why do you prefer approaching with that bare style?
I wouldn't call my it particularly bare. I think it's bare out of context. If you don't know what comic scripts are, you look at it and think it's bare. I think it falls right in the middle of the spectrum of what comics are. I mean, comic strips are everything from Stan Lee going to Kirby and being like, how about something in space, Jack? And then he like does, freaking Silver Surfer. Like that was his script. How about something in space? That's really bare. And all the way, obviously, to Alan Moore's on the other extreme, where he's like every single panel, every single detail, literally like you need to draw this line here and that line there, and this will look like this, and here's, and then and there's lots, and so that's the Marvel style on one side, and I don't know what you call the other style, like, but so um there are people like Scott Snyder, who's more Marvel style. Like his scripts are much more sort of flowy and kind of like whatever you want. And here's like some ideas. Maybe you do this and maybe you do that. My scripts aren't that. There's no maybes. There's no like here it is. It's like but it's just and it's broken into panels, and all the dialogue is there in the script. So it's just very succinct and direct. So it's like, this is what's in this panel, this is the dialogue. And there's no, a lot of people put conversations with their artists. I don't put conversations in. My scripts are very easy to sort of picture the story. I want my artists to be able to read the scripts and see the comic, and then do that. And of course, I don't adjust how I write my scripts, but I adjust what I write for each artist. I always try to play into my artist's strengths and sort of what they want out of this book. If you're a guy who wants to sell art pages, I'm going to give you some splashes with Superman and Batman on them. If you're someone who wants to, win awards, I'm going to give you sort of more artsy fartsy stuff that appeals to that audience. I want my artists to come out of this experience, wanting to work with me again. That's my number one goal in all of it.
Well, you've been extremely successful at that. I don't think anybody, I mean, obviously there are so many tremendous artists in this industry, but in terms of, getting the best of the best talent and then working with them across multiple times to develop a style with them, you really have sort of carved out your space in this industry as that person who's able to work with the best of the best every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of luck, in being paired with the right people, and it's also, I think, like I said before, I'm very close with three artist friends of mine, Mitch Garrett's, Clay Mann, and Doc Shaner. We have a thread that runs all day long, and we constantly talk. And I'm the only writer on the thread, so I get to see them sort of bitch about writers and say all the bad shit, and so I try to listen and be, being with an artist is like being in a marriage. You got to see it from their perspective, and see what you can bring to it, to make sure they're as happy as they can, because a happy artist is a great artist. And also, my philosophy in all of this is like, if we're not having fun, why are we doing this? You only get to be on this earth one time. We're not here to drag it. We're here to make to make the books of our dreams. So let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. So on Helen of Wyndhorn, while I was reading it, I don't know what your intents were, but it really struck me that Helen has this story of sort of being, she's having a life and she doesn't really have much of a connection to her family. And, her dad dies and it's this awful stuff. And then she meets her grandfather and it opens up a whole new world for her. And it made me think about some of my own life experiences of where, you kind of feel alone in the world, you feel isolated, you're looking for that family, and you might go looking for it. And sometimes you try really hard to live up to an idea or live up to an ideal. And I feel like Helen is always doing that with her grandfather. And so, what I've connected to most with this story has been the journey of this girl to sort of earn her grandfather's love in a lot of ways, but also figure out who she is in the midst of this incredible, fantastical experience that she's having.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very intimate story. I mean, I wanted to do something. I love stories with fantasy elements. I love obviously sci-fi stories, but I really love when those stories serve as sort of metaphors for personal connections, um, and for personal journeys. I mean, you could read Star Wars as like, all that stuff is just about Luke, you know, escaping from banality into something interesting, right?
Sure.
Like, that was the kind of feeling I wanted to go for. I mean, it's a very personal story. It's about a girl whose father killed herself, and it's about a man whose son killed himself, and the two of them meeting, and having to deal with that sort of generation in between them, and them both finding, because they're just closed off people. Helen's closed off because all she's known is her father, who was a very broken person, and the grandfather is, of that generation where he's just not someone who connects with people. He's a fucking Conan the Barbarian. He's not about emotions. And having those two people have to connect with each other in order to not only to save Helen, but to save Othin or to save Barnabas. That's the whole thing. It's crossing generations, and it's all very. I guess it's personal to me. You don't realize it when you're writing it. I was raised mostly without a dad. Um, and my mother, I was raised by a single mother who was working real hard, came home at 9 o'clock every night. So, like a lot of people in that situation, I had my grandmother, I had my father's mother who sort of stepped into that role of like, my son's not here. I got to provide for this child. So I was sort of half raised by my grandmother, and us having to connect, with that generation missing. I try to pour some of that into this book.
Yeah, I think it all comes across. And you said something really interesting about, you don't notice it necessarily in the moment that you're putting some of these real life pieces of you in the book. Do you ever look back on your work and say, "Wow, I didn't realize that I was exposing that part of myself here," right? Or I didn't realize that I was going in, down that road.
Dude, all the time, all the goddamn time. You never, when you're writing it, all you're doing is you're making deadline. You're trying to put food on the table. You're trying to get that paycheck. You're trying. I got 3 kids. You think it's all commerce. I mean, you try to make it as good as you can.
Sure.
But I think especially in comics where we have to do so much. I do a script a week, day in, day out. And there's only so many experiences. There's only so many things you can rip off. You start to scrape at your own soul just to sort of put words on the table. And so when you finish something, you're like, oh, that's what that book was about. And it's because I don't like being an autobiographical guy. Like I don't like reading stuff that's just like, oh, here's my sad life. I don't know. I don't want to throw any indie people under the bus, but some indie comics are like, oh man, I'm so sad and I'm just having trouble with all of my life. Here's my comic about that. Um, and some of those are my favorite comics ever, but some of them get a little solipsistic and belly button looking for me. And I just like, I want to create fantasies. I want to create, stories and myths and extremes. And you try to run as far as you can from yourself. And then at the end, you just find yourself right there.
But I think that's so funny because you have the reputation for being that guy among the like top tier cream of the crop DC and Marvel writers. You have the reputation of being the one who puts so much of your heart and soul onto the page. And it's funny that you would
I'm an
say that
idiot.
you're
Why do I
running
do
from
that?
that.
For sure, for sure. Well, when I first started writing, and this was a hard lesson to learn, but a good lesson. When I first started writing, I wrote about myself. I put myself in the work, and I had a lot of trouble with it. Where I was just writing, characters that were, oh, here's, I was like a white guy in his late 20s who went to Iraq. So I want to write a book about a white guy in his late 20s who goes to Iraq. Like, and I'll just write. And then I was like, these are just my thoughts. And my thoughts are the most boring thoughts because I've thought them already. I've heard them 1,000 times. I put them on paper. I was like, there's nothing interesting here. It was only when I was like, let me pretend to be somebody else. Let me like, what would Batman sound like? What would Helen of Wyndhorn sound like? Where I was like, okay, and then I could just push back, and I was like, oh, their thoughts are interesting, their takes are interesting, their voice is interesting. I mean, this book you just read, it's told from the perspective of a nanny and a 40-year-old British nanny who's and she has like this very very upper class whiny kind of voice, and it was just and it was so easy to write in that it's not at all me. And then I write the whole thing, I was like, wait, is this all about my grandma? And I was writing this nanny's voice the whole time. So yeah, I don't know. It's you run again. Yeah, at the end of, if you're a writer, at the end of every road, there you are.
Actually, I have a question. And then, since you bring up the nanny and Helen and Wyndhorn, what is it like writing from that perspective? Because you did something similar in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, where the book is almost being told to you from another person's perspective, and then we're seeing that story be told. What is it like trying to write in that kind of style?
Yeah, I mean, this book was very much intended to be, because I was like, oh, this is going to be a hard sell because I can't even. I'm pitching, like my agents are like, what's the Hollywood pitch on Helen of Wyndhorn? I'm like, oh man, I have no idea. It's Conan meets Wuthering Heights. Like, like, what the fuck is that, Tom? So like, when I first started, I was like, I'm gonna make this parallel to Supergirl, so at least I can easily say, if you like Supergirl, buy this. Like, I want to do whatever we did that worked in Supergirl. I want to add to this because I was super proud of how that came out. So I chose that same, what they call a what do they call it? And I always think of it as the Watson narrative. Like Sherlock Holmes is narrated by Watson, who's not really the star of the show, but is like observing it from the sidelines and sometimes interacts with it. It's also like The Great Gatsby, how Nick does that. And that's what I did with Ruthie and Supergirl. So I was like, I'm gonna use that same technique, but I can't use that. Ruthie was this kind of young, was a teenager with kind of this Western twang, and she used all these kind of funky words in weird sort of ways. So I was like, I got to go away from that. And yeah, I was reading old British Gothic novels, and I was like, I'm going to use this old British sort of Bronte sisters voice. And so that's where I sort of stole that voice from and put it in. So it's honestly very freeing. It's a very fun way to write. It's much harder to write. I wouldn't say no. I'm going to take back what I was. It's fun because you have the voice in your head, so that makes it easier. But writing those captions and actually capturing that voice it's harder, just page for page. Much easier to write like a Batman comic doesn't have narrative and he just has like 3 words per page. And then when I'm writing Helen, I'm like, I got to write a fucking novel on every goddamn page. Like, there's a lot of goddamn words in Helen. So, yeah. So yeah, it's funny. I'm doing Black Canary now, and that's hosted by like WWE commentators, and it's like the exact opposite. It's like nothing is sophisticated. No offense to WWE commentators, but it's like very direct and very like vicious.
Play by play is what it is. Yeah.
Far from British nannies as you can get.
You're talking to 2 lifelong wrestling fans, so that's right.
Oh,
and lifelong Black Canary fans. So here we go.
Hell yeah, my son got me into wrestling. He loves it, so now we watch it together. We went and saw SmackDown in DC like 2 months ago, and it was awesome. And that's one of my little passions now. I know I'm it's like coming to a nerd in my 40s. It's not a good time to come to a nerd, but fuck it, I like it. So
I mean, let's be honest, Tom. You've been a nerd for a little bit longer than that, right?
I know, but Kevin Owens and Cody are my 2 favorites, and they just turned on each other. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Welcome to the pastime.
You gotta get your son, as an aside, you gotta get him to WrestleMania. It is the greatest thing going, and I wish I had been able to go when I was a little kid. It's so fun.
Okay, I've offered. I have a few dollars in the bank. I was like, let's go. I'll get seats. And he's kind of, my son is 15 and he's super into it. And he's kind of afraid that if he sees too much of it live, it'll break kayfabe for him. Like he doesn't because I even, I could do things where like, I could be like, I'm mildly famous where I could be like, let's go backstage or just like meet some. And he's like, I don't want anything. And you do that. I wouldn't do it for myself, but for my kid to try to impress him, I might do it. And he's like, no, I don't want to see any behind the scenes. I want it to all be as real as he obviously knows it's fake, but he wants to just watch the story. He doesn't want to watch how the story's made.
Wow. Sounds like me when I was 15 with wrestling.
Yeah. He's into it, man. He watches Raw, SmackDown, NXT. He's doing it all. He also does his homework. He gets good grades, but he just watches. I'm just saying. I make sure I'm still a good dad.
I want to.
But when I was a kid, I was into comics, and like my parents hated it, and they fucking were like, "This is the dumbest thing anyone could be into," and I felt very isolated. So I'm trying not to do that to my son. To be like, if you're into wrestling, this is your thing, then I'm into it with you. Let's go down this rabbit hole together. So.
Every kid needs that. Like, they need a parent who's willing to like kind of go down the rabbit hole with them. Like, surely when we were kids, we all remember like that one toy that we really wanted, or
for sure.
For me, it was like, like wrestling and video games, and they took it seriously. So I was able to just enjoy it without like feeling like a loser because I had nobody else. So
mine was a Turbo Man from Jingle All the Way, and they didn't make it, and that was hard to figure out as a kid. Like,
so you're living the movie in your own life. Your poor father
they didn't make
is going off with Sinbad, trying to find some help.
My dad is also Sinbad. That's another weird fact, but yeah.
That makes sense now.
I want to remind everybody that Helen of Wyndhorn #6 is on sale November 13th. Definitely go pick it up. That's the last issue. So that means that you can read the whole story across 6 issues. It's not a huge investment if you're a comics reader. So go out and pick it up. I think it gets the Comics Pal seal of approval for sure. So if you are a fan of Tom's, which I'm sure you are, if you're a fan of Bilquis Evely's, which I'm sure you are, this is a slam dunk buy. Go get that.
And let me just to earn my pay. Helen's a tough one because the first, I think 3 or 4 issues sold out, and we went back to second printings, and we stopped going to printings. So it's if you're like, oh crap, I need to pick up the first one. It's not going to be on the shelves, and you're like, I don't know. The hardcover is going to be so beautiful. You can just order the crap out of that hardcover.
Awesome.
It's a good sit. I don't know. As I get older, what I want from comics is like to wake up on Saturday morning and those hours where you're just free and you can lay on the couch and have the sunshine behind you and you can disappear for an hour reading a comic. That's what Helen is, man. You'll disappear and you'll be in a cool world and you'll get that sort of that high that only comics can get you. So the hardcover, that's the way to go if it's sold out of your store.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you're earning a full shelf's worth of material behind me, so that'll be a good addition to it. Yeah.
Let me say hell yeah. That's awesome, man. I apologize for getting this dinty background in my office in LA, which we have nothing on the walls. Or if I have stuff on the walls, I couldn't show it to you because it's all spoilery. So this is the one wall I can show you, which has shit nothing on it.
Well, you're over there doing the big boy job. And speaking of that, being in LA, sort of working with agents and trying to get things, green lit in Hollywood, does that, you said commerce earlier, and that really stuck with me. The business aspect of making comics, of trying to make your art into a commercialized product, which is what you do, does that take away on some level from your enjoyment of the process of creation, of being able to put it out there into the world? The fact that it has to have a commercial value, the fact that your agents are asking you, how do we pitch this? Does that stuff sort of, come into conflict with your creative side?
Only in the sense that there's just so many hours in the day, I wish I had time for all the marketing I need to do. I don't tweet enough. I don't Instagram enough. I don't TikTok enough. Like there's like 1,000. I don't communicate with the marketing teams enough to push my books because there's just I'm working every day just being creative and trying to and just reading, and that's all. Hitting my deadlines always comes before that stuff. So only because I'm frustrated that I can't do it more. I mean, I don't. I mean, if I wasn't getting paid or anything, I probably wouldn't. I'd like to be like, oh, I'm such a fucking artist. I would just write, and that's all I'd care about. But I mean, my top priority is always my family, it's my kids and my wife, and sort of getting them the best life I can. Um, and so I'm not ashamed of saying, this is my job and I do it for a living to put food on the table for my kids and make sure that they have the options that maybe I didn't have or the options I did have growing up. And also my dog, she's terribly expensive. She chews through fucking houses. I don't know. So I don't mind the commerce aspect. I want as many people as possible to read my books. I'm proud of them. And so getting them out there, that's part of the fun. What I like about comics is they're a lot easier to market. I started novels to market than novels were because the comics community wants to hear from you. There are podcasts like yours, and there's a Twitter community, and we can talk to each other because a lot of comics, not all of comics, but a lot of it is about the social idea that we all read the same things and get to talk about, even to shit on them. If you're like reading Heroes in Crisis, and you want to talk about how terrible it is, getting together with your friends and telling people Tom sucks is a fun time. It's a good way to spend a few hours with your buddies. Comics is a ticket to a party. And I love that aspect of it. It makes it a lot easier to sort of to sell it. So yeah, I don't know.
It's actually how
I don't know if that answers your question. That's a big wandering nothing.
No, it does. It does. And I appreciate the candor because I think that as fans, we can sometimes fall in love with this illusion of the artist that is just so passionate that, all they do it just for the love and nothing else. And, that's what we want to hear. But it's like, no, these are people that are human, have families, are trying to put food on the table. And this is the way that you guys do that. And I think what often gets lost in the conversation about creators is that you guys have to earn your living. The art isn't free. Going and pirating it isn't helping Tom King put food on his table, and it's not enough to just say, oh, well, DC pays him. That's not quite how it works. It's not like, you're not Christopher Nolan making Interstellar, making millions and millions of dollars, right? Like, it's still, you're a huge name, but it's still comics, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it on your part.
I appreciate that, but don't cry for me, Argentina. A lot of people are having harder times than me. Uh, I mean, but I will say this, and I think most comic, whenever I try to be commercial, whenever I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna do the thing that's gonna sell, and I'm not gonna care about what I'm writing and just write what the audience wants, it always turns out shitty. Like, you're that can work for some people. There's a famous novel called Love Story that got turned into a movie, and like the writer, I don't know, this may be an apocryphal story, so I apologize, but the writer of that was like, he just read every romance novel and tried to like do a calculation or an algorithm and just produce like the ultimate romance book, and that became this book, Love Story. I like if I could do that, I would do it. I mean, if I could figure out the formula to have the best selling comic ever, I would sell out and do that. But whenever I try to do that, I just fall flat on my fucking face. I always do better when I'm writing from whatever I want. When I'm writing a story that I love, when I'm writing from the soul, when I'm writing, when I'm making the artist happy. Like, it just happens to be a coincidence that I do better commercially when I'm doing better artistically. Thank God.
That makes a lot of sense. I've been following your career in comics since you started, and the projects that have connected with me the most, whether they were, a Marvel project, a DC, an independent project, it's always the ones that feel closest to some level of reality, something that
Yeah.
I could feel, and on some level, I don't know the truth of your life to be able to say, oh, well, this is definitely from Tom, but I can feel humanity in it beyond the superheroics or whatever. There's the humanity, and that's the piece that I connect and vibe with.
No, I appreciate that. I always say that Jonathan Hickman, who's a fantastic writer, and I kind of have the opposite approach to comics. We kind of represent poles in it, where like Hickman takes superheroes and characters and he like raises them up into the sky and makes them like gods. Like, when I read a Hickman book, I'm like, oh, this is what it must be when like Zeus talks to Hera. Like, it's just like the people talking seem divine. And almost utterly untouchable. And then I feel like I do the opposite. I take these gods and I smush them down to earth, and they're just like, this is what it's like to live in the muck of goddamn free will, So I feel like, yeah, that's kind of simple when I say it like that, but yeah.
But it's true, and I think that point is often kind of glossed over. We can get so caught up in like power levels and who can do this, feats of strength and all that. But I don't think that's why comics are so popular. Superheroes are so popular. Like, I'm sure it's a part of it, but it's the humanity, right? Like, the Hulk is that part of us that's like, like we can feel that.
Dude, 100%. I mean, it has to be both things. Like, the exaggeration makes it interesting, makes it cool. The Hulk obviously is sort of this Jekyll and Hyde metaphor of like that anger inside you that you have to repress that sometimes comes out. And you could write a book about an angry young man who's like at home and sometimes just shouts out the window, but that would be fucking boring. So it's much better to write a book about a big green monster who throws tanks. And you're like, yeah, all right, let's go. So it kind of, it has to be a bit of both things, I guess. But yeah, the more personal things are, the more. I mean, that's why people read your books, right? They're trying to discover something about themselves and their commonality with you, right? Like, that's and neither of us can sort of express what is in us, so we sort of write these stories, and you're like, that story hits me in a person you don't know me, but that's because like we're communicating through this story. I'm putting something of mine out there, and it's and part of my soul, and you're putting part of your soul, and we're meeting in the middle, and that's the best part of writing, I guess.
I can't even believe, I'm sorry, I can't even believe you just said that, because that is the exact same thing that Grant Morrison told me. The exact same thing.
Oh, he told you in a great accent and very excitedly, I imagine.
I'm there crying like, oh my God, your Batman run saved my life and did all these wonderful things. And they're like, oh yeah, that's because I'm reaching out and you're reaching out and we just connect. We just understand each other. And I'm like, yes, exactly.
Yeah, dude, he's the magic man, dude. Grant's the best. He was very nice to me at the beginning of my career. He's very nice to everybody, and so I have a soft spot for Grant. Not to mention he printed some of the greatest comics ever. So,
Is there any vulnerability in that you worry about showing people? Like, is there an aspect where you kind of go, oh, actually, I've reached too far. Maybe I've overextended.
yes, all the fucking time. Yes. Yeah, like 100%. I was like, oh, I wish that, there's like a famous panel of me, not me, of where I've Hal Jordan, a character I love, obviously I'm working on right now, who I just think, if you want, I wrote this thing with Doc Sheen and Hal Jordan. I just think he's the most fun character to write in the history of comics. Because to me, he's like, he's Captain Kirk, he's Bill Shatner, man. He's just like all sky, like no worries. But I wrote this panel where he was saying, he didn't even know what will was, what the concept of will was. And it's very personal to me because I struggle with that. I was like, I don't know, because what does it mean to have free will? Like you can't, will is not something you can touch or even describe, or it's like, it's the opposite of necessity is will. But I don't know, and there are like many philosophers who struggle with it. And I was like, I've always just kind of struggled with that concept of what is will. Even if it exists or doesn't exist. And so I put those words in his mouth, like he's having a bad day and he's got some doubts. And so he says, like, I don't even know what will is. I know I have it, but I don't know what it is. And I get creamed. He's like, of course fucking Hal Jordan knows what will is. And I was like, oh, I went too personal. I should have pulled that back a little bit. I do sometimes. There's always the worry that sort of you're putting too much of yourself into any of it. But like I said, if I could do this the other way, if I could do it the impersonal way where I just make big hits without thinking about that shit, I would do it in a second. But this is the only way I know how to do it. So I guess I got to keep going.
You write what you know at that point, right?
Yeah, you just write what you know. I mean, yeah, I think that's if you're not coming at something from a place of knowledge, then you're just coming at a place from ignorance, and everyone can sense it on you and smell it on you, and so it's just completely worthless, So I might as well come at something from somewhere I know something about.
But what I always like about the one that always jumps out to me when I think about you doing this was Strange Adventures. Like, I have not been in an intergalactic war before, but I understand what it means to like have a family, So
Yeah.
having that Adam Strange is relatable as a person. Maybe not the actual situation he's in, but there's a bit of you, or there's a bit of just like humanity in there that's baked in that makes that book relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I always think of this sort of talking to Mr. Miracle, where I sort of ended Mr. Miracle with sort of Scott making this decision where he sort of chose his family over ending the war, and how that's a really noble thing to do, to sort of cling to your own love. But I was like, but that could also lead to making terrible decisions and sort of, I'll spoil Strange Adventures, but like Adam Strange basically makes that same decision and makes a horrible mistake where he's like, to save my family, I have to betray something I love. And he decides to do that. He decides to sort of sacrifice everything, his own sort of soul and his own sort of morality for his family. And I feel like a lot of people, face that decision every day, where you're just like we were talking about before, like, if you're working at a goddamn, I don't know, dumping gas into a lake and you're like, shit, I hate this job. It's the worst thing. I'm making the planet worse. And you go home and you're like, but I need to get healthcare for my kids. Like, my kids need braces. Yeah. And then that's the decision you make. You're like, all right, fuck it, I'll go to hell so my kids can go to heaven. Some people make that choice.
Wow, that is deep. I'm going to be thinking about that later.
Don't think about it too much. You might not be able to sleep.
You're right.
Anyways, Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes. How is this going to play out? Is The Rock going to be involved?
Yeah, at least the wrestling
still wrestle?
is influencing the next book. Yeah.
He'll definitely be back. He'll definitely be back. Can we talk a little bit about DC? Can we get into that a little?
Sure. Yeah, I've been there for a decade. I think I know pretty well. Unless you're talking about Washington, D.C., I've been there for 2 decades.
You know a little bit about it. So right now, DC's got the All In initiative going on. I feel like it's super exciting.
It is.
And
I feel like I tweeted out, I think like a year and a half ago, I was like, DC Renaissance is coming, and I feel like it's getting there, man. We're just at the start of it, man. Superman's coming. Like this is a thing. It's a thing, the DC Renaissance, for sure.
do you feel at this point like you are still at the forefront of sort of leading the charge of making DC what it is? You've got Wonder Woman. Are there other aspects of your storytelling that you want to bring to the table to kind of like be a bigger part of All In, or are you happy with Wonder Woman, Black Canary, kind of carving out your space in this bigger tapestry?
I'm happy with them just clinging to the side of the ship by my fingertips, man. I co-created and I'm co-writing and executive producing a 9 o'clock Sunday HBO show. It takes a lot of work. And it's really good. It's going to be great.
Can't wait.
So the fact that I'm doing all it takes to sort of make that come to life in a way that's respectful to the fans and the characters, and is just a thrilling vision. And I can do that and still be in the DC universe, and still, I'm still writing one of the big books in Wonder Woman. I'm still getting to do sort of these little minis I've always loved and are my favorite things to write, with Black Canary coming up, and I just started a new one. Jenny Sparks. Jenny Sparks. I always forget poor little Jenny Sparks. Yeah, Jenny Sparks is still going, which is a real weird book. I've never been. I mean, I guess I wrote Batman for 85 issues, so I must have been at the center of some of them. But I've never been the guy who wants to be like, let me tell you where the books are going. Here's the direction. Here's the big crossover we're gonna do, where you guys do this and you guys do that. I hate telling other people what to write, and I hate being told what to write. So I've kept to that philosophy, and it's still my philosophy to this day. I want Wonder Woman to be a big mainstream superhero book that's about how awesome she is. That's my priority there, and I want to keep writing. I wouldn't call them artsy fartsy books, but stuff with Ryan Sook, stuff with Mitch Garrett, stuff where I get to do the more personal superhero work that kind of falls next to continuity instead of right on top of it. As long as I can keep doing those two things, I'm super happy with where I am in DC.
With Wonder Woman, you've talked about how you want to do 100 issues, and obviously with Batman, if you take the
what a goddamn idiot I am. Too hard, man. Too hard.
Oh my god. So what did you kind of discover about Wonder Woman while you were deciding that this was the book you were going to take on, that made you go, that's the gem, that's the key, the emotionality that you connected with, that says I can do this for 100 issues and sort of make my statement about who Wonder Woman is?
I mean, I think it was like 2 or 3 things. Let's see if I can remember them all. I mean, number one was sort of determining what makes her different than Clark and Bruce, who I've written extensively in other materials, and being like, what it all makes, because it's very hard to be like, okay, she's someone who never gives up. Well, so are Batman and Superman. She's someone who is very compassionate and cares about other people. Yeah, so are Batman. Well, at least Superman is. She's badass. Well, Batman is also bad. It's like, what separates her? What gives her a unique personality? And I was struggling with that and being like, I don't know. She's just that. In that way, she's kind of just too generic. And then I was like, she's rebellious. I was like, oh, she's a rebel, like that. I was like, because Batman what does he do? He just enforces the law, man. He works with the police that's like his best friend is the police commissioner. And Superman, man, he's truth, justice, in the American way. Like there's something just they're both guys who are like and I love them. They're my favorite characters, but they're status quo guys, on some level. And she's not that. That's what makes her different. She's against the system. She's not with the system. She wants, and that made it be like, okay, she's the rebel. She's punk. She's coming from the outside, and she's tough as shit and doing it. I was like, okay, that I liked, and that's where I thought I could do it. And the other thing was stealing from the other Tom Taylor, and what he's doing on Nightwing, which blew my mind as a guy who had written Grayson, where Tom is like, what if I just give the audience what they want, which is like they want, what if I don't like deconstruct this character is the way I would put it, but like just construct them. Like just here's Nightwing. Here he's got an awesome puppy. He's doing really nice things. He's having a great romance, and it just makes you happy to read this book. And I was like, I wanted to do a book that's to steal from Tom and just be like, every issue of this is not going to be a deconstruction of Wonder Woman and what she means. It's going to be just be like, this is why Wonder Woman is awesome. And it's not going to say she's not challenged. She's going to be fucking thrown through the gauntlet. That's how you show you're awesome. But just having that theme of like every book points back to that north of like Wonder Woman is awesome. Prove it to me. That's why I start every issue with like, Tom, prove to me Wonder Woman is awesome by the end of this issue. I was like, okay, let's go. And so that made it possible to me. I don't know, but let's hope it works.
I mean, I know it worked in that one issue specifically where she gets thrown with the gauntlet of her rogues gallery, and she systematically just takes him out. I mean, that was like, okay, I can see the difference here, why Wonder Woman is who she is.
Yeah, and that's another thing is just having Daniel Sampour, like a guy who just has kind of like a modern day George Perez, who can do just everything and make it look gorgeous and do so much work. He does 6 issues in a row, which is almost impossible in modern comics. So having a partner like that makes the whole thing fun and possible. I get to hang out with Daniel at New York Comic Con if you guys.
Hey,
so come
nice.
come by. You get Danny and I to sign some comics for you.
I would,
especially Wonder Woman 14, which is the big controversial or the big issue coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, speaking of which, I actually read the Absolute Power tie-in issues, and I really I love. Well, I understand exactly what you mean, and I can only imagine how tough it is on your side of things to have to work in some of that tie-in stuff. But the issue with Damian and her specifically, where they're kind of trying to get something out of Boomerang, Captain Boomerang. And they, she's trying so hard with love, and that doesn't work. And Damian's trying with fear, and that doesn't work. And I kind of like that it's sort of left in this ambiguous place of like, well, what can work? Neither one of these can work. And Wonder Woman fails, and to me, that was a statement of love is beautiful, but not everybody can sort of be swayed by this. Like, not everybody can be penetrated in the way that she was trying to apply sort of her skill set. What makes her uniquely different is that she'll lead with love, whereas Batman, he'll lead however, Superman will lead however, she'll lead with love, and that simply just doesn't work with a guy like Captain Boomerang.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah, and that's another challenge with Wonder Woman is you don't always want every adventure to win by her punching the hardest. She has to win sort of through these other ways. I did that whole 3-issue arc Sacrifice where, in each one she wins through another way, and none of it involves violence. She defeats, in the first one she wins, through her love of her mother. In the second one she wins through love of Steve Trevor, and the third one she wins through the love of Cheetah. So like in 3 different issues she defeats the villain using love in 3 different ways. So that's the focus of Wonder Woman, on that idea that you can do. But yeah, and I love putting her with Damian because Damian doesn't give a fuck about love. That's not him. So it seemed very natural. And yeah, I do think, she's learning in this book that there are limitations. And the next arc after 14 is called Fury for a reason. It's not about love, it's about anger. It's about her being pissed. So yeah, she's gonna learn the other side of that coin.
as that progresses, how do you want to see her? Like, is there a point A to a point B to a point C that you kind of want her to grow into? Because you mentioned you want to kind of build as opposed to deconstruct. So, what if you have that? What is that kind of direction for her?
I don't know. It's tough. Like, I had that on Batman where I sort of had an A, B, C, and like, if you look at the last issue of Batman, it's about him sort of being like, I always felt Batman focusing on the death of his parents. It's the thing that's best about him. It's the thing that's most relatable, and it's the thing every writer is going to go back to, including me. But there's also something about it that's slightly childish. We all have parents who die, and part of living is learning how to deal with that, right? Like learning how to keep living our lives and not let our parents' death define us the way it does define Batman. And so that was like the arc. Like at the end of it, he's like, yes, my parents died and it made me want to kill myself and made me want to fight Batman. But that was a child, and I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult now, and I can sort of move on to other things. But it was immediately washed away because I'm not going to change the Batman character to the next issue. He's going to be depressed about his kids again, about his parents again. So I don't know if there's like, I don't know if Wonder Woman needs to grow. I'll let you know at the end. I mean, obviously, it's going to be about her daughter and sort of what that's like being a new mother. I've written a lot of new mother stories or new father stories. So yeah, in some ways, I guess probably learning about herself through Trinity will be, I guess, the ultimate story, would probably my guess. But I don't know. I'll tell you when I get there. I kind of know where it ends, but I don't know what she's going to learn along the way. She'll have to tell me.
Is that a little freeing, not having that ABC, just kind of being able to go where the story leads you?
I mean, you always want to know where you're going. You always want to be like, I am going there. Like that's where I'm headed. I see it very clearly. I know exactly what, I'm writing this Fury arc now. I know what first we're going to do some fun, issues with Batman, and then we're going to go into this long arc that Danny and I have been planning for a while. So you always want to know where you're going, but that doesn't mean you never want when you're writing to be like, okay, I got to get through this issue because people are going to really love issue 5. Issue 3, I mean, that's just set up for issue 5. Whatever the fuck. I don't care about 3. 5 is the one. Like, you want to be like, I'm on issue 3. Issue 3 has to be the best goddamn issue 3 I've ever fucking written. Like, you want to let yourself be as free as you can to make what's in front of you as good as it can be. Or else, you can get too focused on the future, not focused enough on the present, and you just drop the ball. So yes, it's good to know where you're going, but it's also good to just be in the moment when you're writing. So you just make that as good as it can be, if that makes sense. I think.
Totally. I'll be honest.
Cody.
I can point to, well, I wouldn't point to, but I can think of stories that I've read where it's like, all right, I can tell that that's the part you were excited about, and all of this is to get to that part, and it's like, that's cool, but these things are $3.99, man. Come on, bro.
It's also every Netflix show you've ever seen. You get to like,
sure.
There's 8 episodes. You get to episode 4. You're like, what the fuck am I doing? Just give me to the. It's like you could just tell they had a beginning and an ending, and then they're like, oh crap, I got 3 more episodes. So yeah, no, yeah. I'll always focus on the fact that someone's paying $3.99 for this thing. You got to make this issue as good as you can. They gave you a crossover issue. Make it about Damian and Wonder Woman, and make it good. Make it shine.
Now, I wanna respect your time. There is one listener question that we wanted to get in here because this person really loves you, and I just wanted to get
I
this
appreciate
out
it.
to you.
Yeah. No, let me know however I can help you out.
Thank you. This is from Cosmo, and Cosmo says, I really wanted to express my complete and utter thanks to Tom, not only for writing my single favorite issue of all time, which was Wonder Woman 10, but also for being the reason I'm even reading comics. If not for Mr. Miracle, Swamp Thing, Winter Special, Vision, or now Wonder Woman, I wouldn't be going to my LCS every week or reading at all, point blank. I was going to quit because I thought it wasn't for me until Tom's book, so thank you. And I can't wait for Crisis on Infinite Corgis.
I mean, that just means the other world to me. That keeps me going. I like literally tonight I gotta get off this Zoom and do a Jenny Sparks lettering pass, and I'm just like, how am I gonna get the energy? But just hearing you say that's gonna get me through the night. So man, you did me a huge favor. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's awesome, and I know Cosmo will be happy to hear that. I don't want to take up any
By the
more.
way, Infinite Corgis is some silly shit, man. I turned it in last week. Crisis on Infinite Corgis.
That's nuts.
Oh man, it's
But,
nuts. It's
like,
crazy.
how do you get to do that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you start as a kid reading comics, loving comics, and then you end up a man who's at the top of the mountain writing about Crisis on Infinite Corgis. Like, do you ever pinch yourself? You know?
Are you now the first person to write 2 crises?
Yes, that'll be my legacy.
There we go. Cool.
But no, that's just issue 1. Issue 2 is a death in the corgi. There's a few. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. All right, Tom. So we're gonna let you go. You've got a lot of stuff on your plate right now. I do want to remind everybody that Wonder Woman 14 drops tomorrow or today when you're hearing this, probably. And that you can get the last issue of Helen of Wyndhorn November 13th, and then the hardcover soon after that. Tom, I hope you have a tremendous time at New York Comic Con. I would love to hopefully run into you. I'll come by and see if we can see you at your booth. It's been fantastic talking to you, and I hope we can do this again.
I mean, I just want to say thank you. I don't know, maybe people have heard it before, but like I said at the beginning, like, comics exist because people talk about them. Paying $3.99 for a book is hard when you can pay $14 for a Netflix subscription. So the fact that you do this, this keeps the engine running. This keeps the whole game going, and I'm incredibly appreciative for you guys, putting together this podcast and putting the energy behind it. It means the absolute world to us creators and to me personally. So thank you, and thank you to the listeners.
Thank you, man. That's very sweet of you to say. Take care. We will see you soon. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment with your
Please.
favorite Tom King story. We'll see you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you.